All right, guys, and we are on volume 3 of the Man of Steel series. We only got one more after this. And this run pretty much continues John Byrne and Jerry Ordway's run. We also have some other writers and artists in this one that are pretty interesting. And this one kind of drops a big kind of bombshell with the first mega crossover, Millennium. How I feel about this, we're going to get into. But should you pick this one up? Is it as good as volume 1 and 2? Let's find out right now. All right, so we're entering the third volume, and as I open this book, I have to say, it's still good, guys. But I'll also be honest, I didn't connect with this one as much as the others. I'm going to get into why. But let's talk about the good. As always, there's some wonderful stories in here that I really enjoyed. The book actually opens up with a pretty funny team up with Superman and Batman as they have to stop a vampire lady from killing people. It's silly, it's over the top, but I can't help but just love and have fun with this type of story. There's also a great story following it that is very much King Kong, and it's about Titano. I think I got that right, guys. My pronunciation usually is horrible, but there we go. And this is beautiful. I love this story. It's a bit heavy-handed, but it has a lot of heart. It's basically just a giant ape who's scared, and thanks to some crazy doctor, he goes berserk and he gets huge and he starts destroying the city, and Superman must stop him. And listen, this is an awesome story. This is kind of the cheese that I look for when reading a comic. These two stories back to back really just filled my heart with happiness. Then we get into a story about Banshee, which is actually also pretty fun. If nothing else, I have to say her design is friggin' great. Both horrifying and scary. This is a cool little story that I actually enjoyed a lot. But then we get into the storyline that kind of brought this down for me. There's this Millennium storyline that was overarching amongst all the DC comics, and some of the stories for this were really meh. Ones I just couldn't get past, and I'm not too sure what the hell Millennium tagline was really in the end. I haven't read too much of DC during this time, but the Manhunters come in and they are just like this weird plot line that I couldn't really get heavily invested into. It didn't help that I felt so out of the loop compared to the rest of the stories here. I just didn't really like most of them, with the exception of a couple of stories in between that had nothing to do with the Manhunters. The one story in the Millennium that I really enjoyed, I have to say is an excellent story, is with Gangbuster and Jose being this badass hero with a lot of, again, heart, with a great side-by-side comparison issue of what would happen with Superman versus what's happening with Gangbuster. And it's a very human storyline with a lot of great moments that actually made me sad, from the cast of characters really growing. And the brutal ending to this issue was just so good. I really enjoyed this storyline. Sadly, the story or the book ends with kind of just okay one-shot type things. The ending, the very last story, as we get through the kind of just okay issues, the very last story is a cool idea, with Superman having to use his wits to stop the evil mastermind from eventually destroying the world or taking over the world. But overall, it just failed to live up to the prior stories for me. So I have to say that this series had some of my favorite stories so far, this book 3, but also had some of the weaker stories so far, probably the weakest for me. And saying that, though, the art still remains pretty high quality. John Byrne gives a good story. We actually get some storylines from Dan Jurgen here, which is really cool. I think this is where he started with Superman until much later. And then, yeah, Jerry is just still killing it on the art. So, yeah, overall, really enjoyed a good portion of this, but also didn't love some of it. So it can't get as high for me as the others. I'm going to still give it a 3 out of 5. I still think it's very much worth reading so far. It's just not as good as Volume 1 and 2, and that's okay. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to go pick these up. They're still on sale right now at the time of the recording. You can still pick them up for relatively cheap. And so far, with Volume 1 and Volume 2 both getting a 4 out of 5 and this one a 3 out of 5, this series is very much worth reading for Superman fans or non